1828, The Last Stand of Meaning, Chapter 1. What is natural language? Language begins in life. A child points to the sun and says, light. A farmer tills the soil and calls it earth. A fisherman hauls in his net and says, catch. These words are tied directly to reality, to things we see, touch, and experience. This is natural language. Natural language is speech rooted in nature, in common life, in shared experience. It is the foundation of common sense. It is how neighbors understand each other, how contracts are honored, how promises are kept. If I say water, you do not need a philosophy degree. You know what I mean. Natural language also anchors law. Law is only trustworthy when its words are clear to ordinary people. If theft means taking something that is not yours, then anyone can recognize justice when it is done. But if theft is redefined as the reallocation of resources, suddenly what was once illegal may be declared legal by power alone. This is where drift begins. Natural language resists drift because it stays close to the ground. It belongs to the people, not to elites. It is the speech of farmers, merchants, builders, parents, and children. It does not need a committee to decide what a word means. That is why Noah Webster, in 1828, worked to capture English as it was naturally spoken and understood. His dictionary was not just a list of words. It was an attempt to fix English to the soil, to reality, to scripture, and to the daily lives of ordinary people. The takeaway is simple. Natural language means words tied to reality. Words everyone can understand. Words that keep law honest and thought clear. Whenever you hear a word in debate, in news, or in law, ask yourself, does this word still tie back to the real thing? Or has it drifted into abstraction, branding, or manipulation? That question is the compass. Because once words drift too far from reality, the compass bends, and society begins to walk in circles. This is natural language. It is where meaning begins. And in 1828, it was the last time English was fully anchored to it. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning, Chapter 2, Natural Speech. How common words carry common sense. Language is not invented in courts or parliaments. It is born in daily life. When a neighbor says, I built a fence, you know what he means. The word fence carries the shared understanding of boundary, labor, and wood set into the ground. When a mother says, the child is sick, everyone knows the difference between health and illness. No debate, no abstraction, just reality. This is natural speech. Words tied so closely to common experience that they carry common sense. Because of this, natural speech is the foundation of trust. People can make promises and contracts because the words they use are clear to everyone. A handshake is enough when both parties understand the same meaning. But when words are stolen from natural speech and twisted into artificial definitions, trust breaks. A promise becomes a loophole. A contract becomes a trap. Look at the word person. In natural speech, a person is simply a man, a woman, or a child. But in modern law, person has been redefined to include corporations, trusts, or even states. Suddenly, the word no longer belongs to ordinary people. It belongs to the system that redefined it. This is why natural speech matters. It is the language that keeps words grounded in reality. It is the common foundation of community, of justice, and of law. When you hear natural speech, you hear honesty. When you hear artificial speech, you hear strategy. One builds trust. The other builds control. Webster understood this in 1828. His dictionary preserved words as they were spoken in the fields, in the workshops, in the homes of ordinary people. He gave language back to the people by fixing it in its natural sense. The lesson of natural speech is simple. If you want truth, listen to how words are used in common life, not in political speeches or corporate contracts. Natural speech is where clarity lives. It is where common sense breathes. It is the soil from which law and liberty must grow. 3. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning, Chapter 3, Natural law. How law is rooted in ordinary speech. Law did not begin in libraries or courtrooms. It began in conversation, in ordinary speech between people. When a man said, "This is mine," and his neighbor respected it, that was the beginning of property. When someone promised, "I will return tomorrow," and kept their word, that was the beginning of contract. When a wrong was done, and the community said, "Make it right," that was the beginning of justice. This is natural law. It is law spoken in plain language, grounded in human experience, and understood by everyone. Natural law is not complicated. It says, do not steal, do not lie, do not harm, keep your promises. You do not need a judge to explain these principles. They are written in the speech and conscience of every human being. But when words drift, law drifts with them. If theft is redefined as taxation, or if justice is redefined as social balance, the anchor is cut. Law no longer protects people. It protects power. This is why Webster's 1828 dictionary is so important. It defined words as they were understood in the age of natural law, before legal fictions began to multiply. When Webster defined law, he wrote, "That which is laid down, ordained, or established. A rule of action. Simple, clear, understandable. Law was a rule rooted in reason and common sense, not an endless maze of statutes. Every generation faces the same choice: law rooted in natural speech, or law buried in artificial definitions. One protects liberty, the other erodes it. If law is not tied to ordinary words, it becomes a game played by specialists. It becomes something ordinary people cannot navigate. And when that happens, freedom is lost. The lesson is simple. Law is safe only when its words are the people's words. The moment law is written in a language ordinary people cannot understand, it is no longer law. It is control. 4. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 4. 1828 as Anchor. Why Webster's dictionary fixed words before drift. Noah Webster did something extraordinary. He froze the English language at a moment when it was still natural, still tied to reality, still grounded in common life. In 1828, Webster published his great dictionary. It was more than a book of definitions. It was an anchor to natural language, to natural law, and to a people who still believed that words should protect freedom, not disguise power. Webster's work was rooted in three things. First, in Scripture, where he drew many of his examples of meaning. Second, in daily American life, where farmers, merchants, and craftsmen gave words their strength. Third, in natural law, where words like liberty, justice, and right had clear, fixed meanings. Take liberty. In Webster's dictionary, liberty was defined as freedom from restraint. It was not a license granted by the state. It was not a temporary permission. It was freedom itself, given by God and recognized by man. Take justice. In Webster's dictionary, justice was the constant and perpetual disposition to render every man his due, not a shifting political slogan, not a vague appeal to fairness, but a clear duty rooted in action. Take person. In Webster's dictionary, person meant a human being, male or female, an individual of the human race, not a corporation, not a government, not a legal fiction, just a human being. By anchoring these words in reality, Webster created a firewall against drift. For as long as his dictionary was used, words could not be easily twisted. They were fixed, visible, and preserved in print. That is why 1828 matters. It is the last dictionary built before the age of spin, before politics and law began rebranding words for power. It is the last checkpoint in the English language where words meant what people knew them to mean. After 1828, the drift began. Slowly at first, then rapidly. Words that once had natural roots were reshaped into artificial tools. And with every shift, thought, law, and liberty drifted with them. Webster's dictionary is not just a relic. It is a compass. It shows us where the words once stood before the flood of manipulation. To reclaim meaning today, we must return to that anchor. 5. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 5, Person Redefined. From human being to legal fiction. In natural speech, the word person is simple. It means a man, a woman, or a child, an individual of the human race. Nothing more, nothing less. But over time, the word person was stretched. Courts and governments discovered that by redefining person, they could redefine rights. The first shift was subtle. Corporations began to be called persons in law. This meant they could own property, enter contracts, and even claim certain protections. A legal invention, something not alive, not breathing, was granted the same standing as a human being. The second shift was more dangerous. When person became a legal category, governments could decide who counted and who did not. Some groups of people were declared persons, while others were excluded. Rights no longer flowed from being human. They flowed from the state's definition of person. This is how slavery was justified. Enslaved men and women were denied the legal status of person, even though in natural speech they were plainly human beings. Later, in the opposite move, corporations were elevated to the status of person, even though in natural speech they were plainly not. Webster's 1828 dictionary anchored person in its natural sense. He defined a person as an individual human being consisting of body and soul, clear, direct, rooted in reality. But once that definition was abandoned, person became a weapon, a tool for inclusion and exclusion, a word of power, not of truth. This is why drift matters. When a word as basic as person is redefined, the very ground of rights and law shifts with it. If the state can decide who counts as a person, then it can decide who counts at all. The lesson is simple. In natural language, a person is a human being. In artificial language, a person is whatever the system says it is. The first preserves liberty. The second controls it. 6. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 6. Liberty Redefined. From freedom from power to state permission. Liberty is one of the oldest and strongest words in the human tongue. In natural speech, liberty means freedom from restraint. It means living without being forced, moved, or silenced by another. But over time, liberty has been captured. Its meaning has been inverted. Today, when officials speak of liberty, they often mean permission. Liberty is described as what the state allows, under certain conditions for a certain time. A license, a privilege, a temporary grant. This is not liberty. It is dependence disguised as freedom. Webster, in 1828, defined liberty as freedom from restraint. He distinguished between natural liberty, the right to act as you choose, so long as you do not harm another, and civil liberty, the portion of natural liberty preserved when people form governments. Even civil liberty, in his definition, was meant to protect freedom, not dissolve it. But as drift set in, liberty was reshaped into its opposite. Instead of freedom from power, it became freedom through power. Instead of a shield against authority, it became a gift handed down by authority. You can hear the shift in modern speech. People talk about civil liberties as though they are favors granted by the state. Courts rule on which liberties are allowed and which are suspended. The compass bends. Liberty is no longer a natural condition. It is an administrative choice. The cost of this drift is high. When liberty is treated as permission, it can be withdrawn at any moment. A society that accepts this has already surrendered its freedom. The lesson is clear. In natural language, liberty is freedom from power. In artificial language, liberty is freedom through power. One protects the individual. The other controls the individual. 7. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 7. Justice Redefined. From balance to political branding, justice is one of the oldest ideas in human history. In natural speech, justice means balance. It means giving to each what is due, no more and no less. A thief takes what is not his, and justice restores it. A man keeps his promise, and justice honors it. A wrong is done, and justice makes it right. This is simple, clear, and universal. Webster, in 1828, defined justice as the constant and perpetual disposition to render every man his due, a living definition rooted in action. Justice was not a slogan, it was a duty. But as drift spread, justice was redefined. It became political branding. Instead of meaning balance, it came to mean whatever goal a movement or authority wanted to pursue. Social justice, climate justice, economic justice. Each new phrase stretched the word further from its root until justice became a banner for power rather than a measure of truth. The danger of this drift is that once justice loses its anchor, it can be used to justify anything. Wars can be called justice. Censorship can be called justice. Even theft can be called justice, so long as the word is wrapped in the right rhetoric. Justice without definition is not justice at all. It is politics wearing a mask. The lesson is this: justice must remain tied to natural speech, to the balance between what is given and what is due. When justice becomes a brand, it stops protecting the weak and starts serving the strong. In natural language, justice is balance. In artificial language, justice is leverage. The first keeps society steady, the second tilts it until it breaks. 8. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 8, Law Redefined. From principle to decree, law, in its natural sense, is simple. It is a rule of action, a principle laid down to guide behavior, clear enough for all to understand. When a community says, "Do not steal," that is law. When a family says, "Keep your word," that is law. When a people say, "Treat others as you wish to be treated," that too is law. Webster, in 1828, defined law as a rule, particularly an established or permanent rule prescribed by the supreme power of a state to its subjects for regulating their actions. At its root, law was a principle, something fixed, something consistent, something grounded in reason. But as drift spread, law was redefined. It ceased to mean principle and came to mean decree. A decree is not a rule of reason. It is a command. It may change tomorrow. It may contradict itself. It may serve one group while punishing another. Decree does not have to be just. It only has to be enforced. This shift is crucial. When law is principle, the people can know it, test it, and apply it. When law is decree, the people can only obey it. In natural language, law protects liberty because it sets boundaries that are clear and fair. In artificial language, law becomes a weapon, wielded by those in power, justified by the simple phrase, "It is the law." But if law means nothing more than decree, then tyranny can always disguise itself as legality. The lesson is this: law must remain tied to principle, not decree. For when law is rooted in reason, it serves the people. But when it is reduced to command, it serves only those who issue it. 9. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 9, Family Redefined. From covenant to category. Family is one of the most natural words we have. In its original sense, family meant a household bound by covenant, husband, wife, children, kin, and the shared duties that held them together. It was not just blood, it was bond. A family was the first school, the first church, the first government. It was the root of society itself. Webster, in 1828, defined family as the collective body of persons who live in one house and under one head or manager. He extended it to mean parents with their children, or even broader, a lineage. But always, family carried the sense of unity under a common life. As drift spread, family was redefined. No longer a covenant, it became a category, a checkbox, a statistic, something the state could count, divide, and redefine at will. Family was reduced to whatever arrangement law or policy decided to recognize. A household could be expanded, contracted, or dissolved on paper, without regard for covenant or tradition. The result was fragmentation. What was once the strongest human bond became an administrative term, a unit on a census form, a demographic in a report. This shift weakens more than language. It weakens culture itself. When family is no longer understood as covenant, the ties of loyalty and duty erode. When family is reduced to category, it becomes fragile, replaceable, and easily managed by systems of power. The lesson is clear. In natural language, family is covenant, a living bond that sustains society. In artificial language, family is category, a statistic that can be altered. The first preserves community, the second dissolves it. 10. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 10. Equivocation in Courts and Politics. One word, two meanings, one verdict. Equivocation is one of the oldest tricks of power. It happens when a single word is used with two different meanings, so that what begins in truth ends in deception. In natural speech, people use words plainly. If you say contract, everyone understands it as a promise or agreement. But in courts and politics, the same word can be split into two meanings. One is offered to the people. The other is reserved for insiders who know how the language game is played. This is how verdicts are shaped, not by evidence, but by definitions. Take the word person. To the public, it suggests a human being. To the court, it may mean a corporation. Arguments shift back and forth between these meanings until a decision is handed down that sounds just, but rests on a redefinition the people never agreed to. Or take liberty. To citizens, it means freedom from interference. To lawmakers, it may mean privileges granted by statute. A politician promises to protect liberty, and the people cheer, unaware that he means only the liberties listed on a government form. Equivocation allows those in power to hide behind language. It gives the appearance of agreement while delivering something entirely different. Webster's 1828 dictionary was designed to block this trick. By anchoring words in fixed, natural definitions, it left little room for shifting meanings. But once those anchors were abandoned, equivocation became one of the most effective tools of manipulation. The lesson is simple. When one word carries two meanings, power will always choose the meaning that serves itself. In natural language, words protect you. In artificial language, words protect those who redefine them. 11. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 11. Euphemism in Government. How soft words mask force. Governments have always relied on euphemism. It is the art of softening hard realities with gentle words, so that what would shock in plain speech sounds acceptable in policy. In natural speech, war means fighting, killing, and destruction. In government speech, war becomes a conflict, a police action, or an operation. The reality does not change, but the word hides the truth. In natural speech, taxes mean money taken from the people. In government speech, they become contributions, revenues, or investments. Again, the reality does not change, but the words disguise the force. Euphemism works because people trust language. If the word sounds harmless, they assume the thing itself is less severe. But the power of euphemism is that it erases accountability. If a war is only an operation, perhaps it does not need to be declared. If a tax is only a contribution, perhaps it does not feel like compulsion. Webster's 1828 dictionary defined words in their natural sense. War was war. Tax was tax. To change the label was to deceive. By anchoring words in reality, he cut through the soft masks of government speech. The danger of euphemism is that it allows force to grow while appearing gentle. It turns acts of power into acts of benevolence. It makes the harsh seem humane. The lesson is this. When government words sound softer than the reality, you are listening to euphemism. And when euphemism becomes the common tongue of authority, truth itself is in danger. In natural language, words reveal. In artificial language, words conceal. 12. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning, Chapter 12, Emotional Packaging. Why Laws and Wars Are Named for Feelings. Another way language is bent is through emotional packaging. This is when policies, laws, and even wars are wrapped in words designed to stir feelings rather than reveal truth. In natural speech, a law might be called what it is: a tax law, a trade law, a military law. Clear, direct, factual. But in artificial speech, laws are given names that appeal to the heart. The Patriot Act, the Affordable Care Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Each title is chosen not to describe the law, but to make you feel guilty if you oppose it. The same pattern appears in war. Wars are rarely called wars anymore. They are branded as operations for freedom, stability, or justice. The words are chosen to stir loyalty and silence dissent. If you question the war, you appear to be questioning freedom itself. Emotional packaging is powerful because it bypasses reason. People stop asking what a law does and focus instead on what its name suggests. They stop asking what a war costs and focus on whether it sounds noble. Webster's 1828 dictionary resisted this trick by tying words to their plain meanings. Words were descriptive, not persuasive. A law was a law. A war was a war. The lesson is this: when language appeals to feelings instead of facts, it is being used as packaging. And packaging is always meant to sell something that would be harder to accept if plainly described. In natural language, words describe. In artificial language, words advertise. 13. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 13. Empty Words in Media. Language that dissolves when tested. Media thrives on words that sound powerful, but carry no fixed meaning. These are empty words, terms that dissolve the moment you press them for definition. In natural speech, words point to reality. If you say tree, there is something outside the window that proves the word. If you say water, everyone can touch, taste, or see what you mean. But in modern media, many words have no anchor. They are used as symbols to stir emotion, not as tools to communicate truth. Consider words like democracy, freedom, or equity. In the mouth of one speaker, democracy means the will of the people. In the mouth of another, it means obedience to institutions. Freedom may mean independence to one group and regulation to another. Equity may mean fairness, or it may mean forced redistribution. The words sound noble, but their meanings shift with every use. This is not accidental. Media depends on ambiguity. By repeating words that cannot be nailed down, it can appeal to everyone while committing to nothing. Empty words allow power to speak without being held accountable. Webster's 1828 dictionary tied words to their natural sense, giving them weight and clarity. But as drift spread, the anchors were cut. The result is a sea of language where words float freely, ready to be filled with whatever meaning the speaker desires. The lesson is clear. If a word cannot survive a demand for definition, it is not truth, it is fog. And when a society lives in fog, it cannot see the road ahead. In natural language, words hold. In artificial language, words vanish. 14. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 14. Using 1828 as a compass. How to check a word before using it. If words can drift, then the first defense is simple. Test them. Before you accept or repeat a word, check whether it still points to reality, or whether it has been bent into something else. This is where Webster's 1828 dictionary becomes a compass. It provides an anchor point, the last great record of English before drift took hold. By comparing a word's 1828 definition with its modern use, you can instantly see how far it has shifted. Take the word liberty. In 1828, it meant freedom from restraint, clear, sharp, grounded in natural law. Today, liberty is often used to mean permission granted by the state. By holding the two definitions side by side, the distortion becomes visible. Or take the word person. In 1828, it meant an individual human being. Today, it may mean a corporation, a legal entity, or whatever lawmakers declare. Again, the drift is plain once you compare it to the anchor. Using 1828 in this way is not about nostalgia. It is about orientation. Just as a sailor uses a compass to stay on course, you use the dictionary to stay in truth. When you hear a word in the news, in law, or in debate, ask, what did this word mean in 1828? If the meaning matches reality, use it with confidence. If the meaning has been twisted, be cautious. The word may now be serving someone else's purpose. The lesson is this: words are not neutral. They are either shields of freedom or tools of control. By using 1828 as a compass, you can tell the difference. 15. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 15. Building a Personal Lexicon. A pocket defense against drift. Once you understand that words can drift, the next step is to guard your own vocabulary. This is where a personal lexicon comes in. A small, trusted set of definitions that you keep as your defense against manipulation. A personal lexicon does not need to be large. Start with the words that matter most: law, liberty, justice, person, truth, right, contract, family. Anchor them in their 1828 definitions and write them down where you can see them. These become your compass points. Why is this important? Because conversation shapes thought. If you use words in their natural sense, you keep your thinking clear. But if you begin to accept artificial definitions, your thought begins to bend without you noticing. For example, if you anchor liberty in its 1828 sense, freedom from restraint, then every time you hear it used as permission from the state, you will immediately recognize the distortion. The word no longer fools you. The same is true for person. Once you fix it as a human being, you will never confuse a corporation or a government entity with flesh and blood. You will hear the difference, even when the system tries to blur it. A personal lexicon is like carrying a pocket compass. It keeps you oriented in a world where words are constantly being pulled off course. The lesson is clear. Do not rely on shifting public meanings. Keep your own set of fixed, natural definitions. They are your shield against drift and your guarantee of clarity. 16. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 16. Speaking with Precision. How clear speech builds trust. Words do more than describe. They build or break trust. When your speech is precise, people know where they stand with you. When your words are vague, they cannot. In natural speech, precision is simple. If you say, I will meet you tomorrow at noon, the meaning is exact. There is no room for drift. If you say, I will return what I borrowed, there is clarity, and the promise can be measured. But when words are left vague, confusion and suspicion creep in. I will come back sometime. I will return it later. We will act soon. None of these are lies, but none are clear. They invite disappointment and mistrust. This same principle applies at every level of society. Families, businesses, courts, and governments all rise or fall on the clarity of their words. A contract is only as strong as its definitions. A law is only as just as its language. Webster's 1828 dictionary helps restore this clarity. It grounds words in fixed meanings so that when you speak, you can align your language with truth. By choosing words with care, you strengthen your relationships, your agreements, and your reputation. Precision does not mean complexity. The clearest words are often the simplest. Say what you mean and mean what you say. That is the essence of lawful speech. The lesson is this: clear speech builds trust. Vague speech erodes it. And in an age where words are constantly being bent, precision is not just a virtue, it is a defense. 17. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 17. Lawful Language. Why contracts and rights depend on fixed meaning. Law rests on language. Contracts, rights, and constitutions all depend on words that do not drift. If the words shift, the foundation cracks. Consider a contract. If the word payment means one thing to one party and another thing to the other, the agreement cannot stand. If the word property shifts in meaning, the very subject of the contract disappears. Precision in language is not optional. It is the lifeblood of law. The same is true for rights. If liberty means freedom from restraint, then it is a shield against tyranny. But if liberty is redefined as whatever the state allows, then rights dissolve into permissions, granted and revoked at will. The words remain, but their power is gone. This is why Webster's 1828 dictionary matters. By fixing words in their natural sense, it preserved the clarity necessary for law to remain just. It showed that lawful language must be rooted in shared meaning, accessible to ordinary people, not hidden behind technical jargon. The danger of drift is that it places law in the hands of specialists. If only lawyers and judges understand the words, then law ceases to serve the people. It becomes a system of control rather than a shield of justice. The lesson is clear. Contracts and rights depend on fixed meaning. If words are allowed to drift, power will always redefine them in its favor. But if words are anchored, law remains a tool of justice, not a weapon of control. In natural language, law is principle. In artificial language, law is manipulation. The difference is everything. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 18, Words as the Firewall of Freedom. Why clarity protects liberty. Freedom does not protect itself. It must be guarded, and its first line of defense is language. When words are clear, power is limited. A ruler cannot take what is not his if the word theft is fixed. A judge cannot twist the law if the word liberty means freedom from restraint. A government cannot disguise force if tax means money taken by compulsion. But when words drift, the walls of liberty weaken. Theft becomes redistribution. Liberty becomes permission. Tax becomes contribution. Each change softens reality, and each change expands the reach of power. This is why words are the firewall of freedom. They are the boundary that keeps force honest. They are the shield that keeps law tied to principle. Webster's 1828 dictionary preserved this firewall. It recorded words before they were bent. It gave citizens a tool to test speech against truth. It showed that freedom is not defended only by arms or constitutions, but by the clarity of the words that describe them. If you let words drift, you let freedom drift. If you guard words, you guard liberty itself. The lesson is this. The battle for freedom is fought first in language. Words are not decoration. They are defense. And clarity is not optional. It is survival. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 19. When speech collapses. The social cost of drifting words. When words lose their meaning, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, society follows. Everyday life depends on shared language. If a father promises to provide, the family trusts him because the words are clear. If two neighbors make an agreement, each relies on the words to mean what they say. If courts declare a verdict, the people accept it because the language of law is expected to be steady and just. But when speech drifts, every bond begins to weaken. Promises become loopholes. Contracts become traps. Laws become tricks of wording. Citizens begin to suspect one another, and suspicion erodes the possibility of community. The cost is not abstract. Families break apart when words like marriage and family are redefined. Nations fracture when words like justice and liberty are hollowed out. People lose faith in institutions when official speech sounds noble but delivers deception. History shows this pattern. Civilizations do not fall only through war or famine. They also fall when words collapse. When no one trusts language, no one can trust agreements. And when agreements fail, the structures of society crack and crumble. Webster understood this danger. By fixing words in 1828, he tried to give future generations a stable foundation. He knew that once speech collapses, rebuilding society becomes nearly impossible. The lesson is clear. The drift of words is not just a linguistic problem. It is a civilizational problem. If meaning breaks, so does the world built upon it. 1828. The Last Stand of Meaning. Chapter 20. The Future of Language. How to guard natural words for the next generation. The future of freedom depends on the future of language. If words continue to drift, thought, law, and trust will collapse with them. But if words are guarded, the compass can be restored, and the next generation can inherit clarity instead of confusion. Guarding language begins with awareness. Each time you hear a word, ask whether it still points to reality. Does liberty still mean freedom? Does justice still mean balance? Does law still mean principle? If not, resist the drift. Speak the word in its natural sense, and refuse to let it be twisted. The second step is teaching. Children learn language by imitation. If they are given vague, manipulated words, they will grow up in fog. If they are given clear, natural words, they will grow up with vision. Every home, every classroom, every conversation is a training ground for meaning. The third step is preservation. Webster's 1828 dictionary is more than a book. It is a record of words before they were bent. Keep it alive. Use it. Share it. Let it be the compass for your speech, your contracts, your teaching, and your law. The final step is courage. There will always be pressure to accept artificial words because they serve power. But clarity is an act of resistance. To speak plainly is to stand free. To insist on truth in language is to keep the firewall of liberty intact. The future of language is not guaranteed. It depends on choices made by those who see the drift and choose to hold the line. The lesson is this: natural words are gifts. They are not yours to lose. They are yours to guard, so that the next generation can speak, think, and live in freedom. Closing. Here's the closing transmission in clean audiobook style, wrapping the book with final weight and clarity. 1828, The Last Stand of Meaning. Closing transmission. Natural words are rooted in reality. Artificial words are rooted in manipulation. The 1828 Webster's Dictionary is not nostalgia. It is the last checkpoint before collapse. It is the final anchor of English before drift pulled words away from truth and into the service of power. If thought is to remain clear, if law is to remain just, if liberty is to remain alive, words must be defended. To lose meaning is to lose freedom. This book has been a course in clear thinking, not just logic, not just definition, but language itself. You have seen how words can be stretched, softened, emptied, or split, and how each distortion opens the door to control. You have also seen how words can be reclaimed, anchored, and used as a shield against deception. The task now is yours. Guard your words. Teach them to the next generation. Anchor them in reality, and refuse to let them drift. The battle for freedom is fought not only on battlefields, not only in courts, but in every conversation, every promise, every law, every definition. It is fought wherever words are spoken. 1828 was the last stand of meaning. The question is whether you will carry that stand forward or let the compass bend. The choice is yours.